Welcome everyone to another episode of Nerdstrodamus. I'm Dr. Pants.
Lambo.
And it's Fire Emblem week. Fire Emblem Three Houses is coming out on the Switch, and if you checked out our previous episode, you know that Lambo doesn't know much about Fire Emblem.
I don't know anything about Fire Emblem.
Really not.
I need a history lesson.
You do, and that's what we're here for. So if you don't know much about Fire Emblem and you want to learn, you've turned to the right place. And if you'd like to see how Lambo did on that quiz, click the link.
I didn't do too badly, I think.
You got 2 out of 5.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's not bad.
Cool.
Not bad. So anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of history lesson, and then we have a nice thing to talk about at the end here. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Fire Emblem has actually been going on for 30 years.
That's insane to me. It's been going on underneath my nose, I feel like.
It has. Yeah. And that's the funny thing about it, is it's actually one of Nintendo's longest running franchises. The first game came out in 1990.
Whoa. So NES years.
Yes, it was on the Famicom.
Wow.
It was Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light, and that starred Marth, which we know because of Smash Brothers. He showed up in, of course, Smash Brothers Melee.
He showed up, and everyone was like, ooh, who's this, suave young swordy guy?
Yeah.
Swordy boy.
And then, Roy's our swordy boy.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is Fire Emblem is considered to be, or was considered to be, a hardcore turn-based strategy RPG, because it included things like permadeath, where if a unit died,
that's it.
They're done.
You're dead.
They're out of the game.
Not coming back.
Right, they're out of the game. It also contained a linear mission structure where basically each chapter was its own mission. You played through that battle, you moved on, a little bit of story between. There wasn't a lot to do between that. Okay, so that was back in 1990, the first one. Of course, Shadow Dragon actually got remade on the DS later and came west.
Was it called Shadow Dragon on the DS?
It was just called Shadow Dragon.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have done Dragon Shadows and it still would have done the DS thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it was called Shadow Dragon.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's still cool.
The first game to actually release in the West then did not come for 13 years.
Wow.
It was just called Fire Emblem on the GBA. That's what we got. It's known by a subtitle called Blazing Blade.
Okay.
Because it is actually the direct sequel to Roy's game, Binding Blade.
Binding Blade.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now all the questions are now making sense to me. This was the right way.
Yes, right?
Because you're relating it to things I know.
Exactly. That's why I did this.
Okay, you're good.
This was the 7th game in the series, which, by the way, if you include all the spin-offs and remakes, there are 20 Fire Emblem games.
That's insane to me because I feel like it's
such a niche series.
It's the Shadow series that's been going on underneath everything else.
Right, and that's kind of the crazy thing. And all these games, like all the ones previously, there are fan translations, and there are fans out there who
love that stuff.
Right, Binding Blade actually got a knockoff GBA cartridge made with a ROM on that you can actually play. So
that's awesome.
Keep that in mind. But the Fire Emblem game was actually released in the West on the GBA because they put Marth and Roy in Smash Brothers, and it drew a lot of attention.
I definitely caught my eye at that point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The funny thing, of course, is neither Marth nor Roy are in the Fire Emblem game that came out in GBA.
But I imagine for Japanese audiences, those would be maybe the most recognizable or maybe the most classic kinds of characters.
Well, Roy at the time was probably the most prominent because he's the main character in Binding Blade, which was the one right before
it had just come out.
Right. And Marth is the original first character, main character.
Nice.
So there were a lot that happened in between. We got Sacred Stones, and we got the GameCube one, the Wii one, and whatnot. But I need to talk about Awakening because this is going to lead us to what we're talking about. Yeah. Fire Emblem Awakening, which you're familiar with a little bit.
Of course, yeah. I was there for it.
This came out in 2012 in Japan, 2013 in the West, and it introduced a bunch of new mechanics. We talked about this in our Valentine's Day episode.
So this is all the
dating mechanics.
Dating mechanics, some of the world building stuff,
right.
That kind of thing. Okay,
right,
cool.
Which it introduced a whole lot of new mechanics. You had the coupling and the marriage, which produced children, which were new units that incorporated traits from the mother and the father. It had DLC. It also included a support mode, which 2 characters next to each other would start to support each other more and more the longer they stayed next to each other.
And just to be really, really clear, before these ones, there was very, very little of this.
Right. In fact, I remember playing Sacred Stones on the GBA, which was the second one we got, and it was just weird to me that I actually moved on the map on my own, and there were every now and then random battles you could get into. But otherwise, it was very story-driven, just go from point A to point B, do the next mission, here. That was it.
Cool.
This changed the game. You had all this stuff to do in between battles where you could interact with your characters, you could build your own base, all kinds of stuff was going on. It also introduced a casual mode.
What's that for? Is that for people who aren't good at games?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, pretty much anybody who was super intimidated by Fire Emblem and the permadeath. Because the idea of losing a unit that you've worked so hard to build up, get to a really great class, like them dying and not getting them back, I mean, it sucks.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you could just restart the mission, but sometimes, and you know from playing strategy RPGs, these missions can go on a while.
Yeah, they can.
So, a casual mode was added. Now, the funny thing about Awakening is not only were these all new mechanics, Nintendo basically said to the team that due to the series' declining sales, this was going to be the last Fire Emblem game.
Oh, no.
We know that's not true!
So ironically, they called it Awakening?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was incredibly well received. It led to a new series direction with incorporating all these mechanics because it did so well. It wasn't just well received, like critically, it sold really well. Which led us to getting Fire Emblem Fates, Fire Emblem Echoes, and of course, we're getting 3 Houses. So, we got to talk about the current state because we've got 3 Houses coming out, and you've seen the trailers. Of
course.
There is still a lot of that simulation aspect.
I feel like I know more about the new one that's coming out than I do a lot of the old ones.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got the school thing.
Yeah.
We're a teacher. We
Right.
can help teach our students. We can help train them. We're going to pick a new house here and there. There is a dating sim aspect to it. The whole thing seems very similar to
Persona?
Persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind this.
No, because that series sort of went a similar way.
Yes.
If you take a look at Persona 1...
And Persona 2.
And Persona 2, while being a lot different from the Shin Megami Tensei games from which they were birthed, they were pretty much sort of played like an offshoot.
Right.
You know, they played very, very much like just a Shin
original
Megami Tensei game.
Persona game is a first-person dungeon crawler. It is super hardcore, and there isn't much of the simulation aspect to it.
No, there is a lot of the cool trying to get personas and do all the different weird cool stuff in battle to get them.
Right, but that's just a Shin Megami Tensei thing.
Right.
Fire Emblem did the same thing for a long time. Then Awakening hit, and we got all the simulation aspects.
I see.
3 Houses dives headfirst into that because now we've got the school, students to teach. It's kind of the reverse of Persona. Instead of being the student, you're now the teacher.
Yeah, and honestly, this is the part of it that actually makes me more interested in this one than any other one beforehand.
It's great you say that, Lambo, because a lot of hardcore Fire Emblem fans are kind of upset.
Oh.
Because they feel that Fire Emblem has lost its way. By introducing all these other mechanics, it takes away from the hardcore combat nature. Adding the casual mode, they feel is like a sin against what it originally was. And also, they feel that because of the art direction, the dating thing and whatnot, it's become too anime or weeby. And it's become too much like Persona.
Okay.
But... and this is my argument for it. Do we still have all the battles from the original Fire Emblem?
Yeah, right?
Can you play it with permadeath?
Why not?
Yeah. So then why is this a problem? Because in my mind, you brought this up in the beginning, you've said this through the whole thing. Fire Emblem was like a shadow series.
Yeah.
Not many people are really into it or aware of it. But you know more about this one. And you probably would feel more comfortable playing this one, wouldn't you?
And honestly, I can actually relate because as a fan of unpopular things, when something you really, really like starts to become really popular, you start to go, oh, but I was a fan back when it was really fun. And back when it was really hardcore and only for us people who could put up with all of its flaws. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the way how everything is, right?
Yeah.
And then when something starts actually kind of appealing to the mainstream just a tad, which is good for everybody. This isn't bad for the extreme, hardcore players.
Right.
Then you kind of start feeling like it's not your game anymore. But it never was. It never was.
And I get what you're saying, because the same thing has happened to me. But if Awakening had not done the things it did that made it more casual and more for a wider audience, we wouldn't even have this game coming out. So, I mean, it had to happen. Otherwise, Fire Emblem probably would have died where it sat, and we never would have gotten Fates, Echoes, or 3 Houses. Now, of course, a lot of the fan base doesn't like Fates. Echoes was okay. But I'm excited for 3 Houses. I'm really, really excited to try it. And, of course, we'll probably stream a little bit of it.
Oh, yeah.
But, so, Lambo, would you play 3 Houses?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because
I'm kind of considering getting it when it comes out. I'm not usually this kind of person. I have my couple of, turn-based strategy games I enjoy, and we'll talk about them. It's coming up here soon. But, this is the first one that actually kind of has me all Twitter-pated. I'm kind of interested.
Is that a word?
That's a word. Go see Bambi.
What? What? It's in Bambi?
It's in Bambi.
And now I learned something. Thanks for watching, and you can check our next episode where we're going to talk about 5 turn-based strategy RPG series that we love that if you're into Fire Emblem, you should check out. So we'll catch you on the next one.